of all, welcome and thank you for coming on such short notice. My name is Sergeant Kathy Williams. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Grand Rapids Police Department. My last name is spelled Williams. Standing to my right, Chief David Rahinsky, Deputy Chief Eric Payne, and on the end is Deputy Chief David Kittle. I'm not used to calling you formal names like that. Okay. Chief Rahinsky invited you all here today to follow up on his press release issued late last night. To give you an idea as to how this is going to go, first of all, I'm going to recap the press release that was released to kind of go over the incident in detail. And then the chief will provide you with the body-worn camera footage from the incident. And lastly, he will field your questions as they relate to today's topics. At the conclusion of our press conference, I would like to make you known that there are copies available of the body-worn camera footage that we are showing today. If you do wish a full copy of the video pertaining to this incident, the FOIA rules would apply. I'll begin by reading the press release that was issued last night at 6:50 p.m. The Grand Rapids Police Major Case Team is currently investigating an attempted murder stemming from the December 6th domestic-related stabbing in the 1300 block of Hamilton Avenue Northwest. Once on scene, officers determined that the suspect fled the residence, still armed with the knife. Their investigation led to a second West Side Grand Rapids home, where it was believed the suspect may have fled to. As officers were setting up a perimeter, 3 females simultaneously exited the home, 2 adults and 1 11-year-old juvenile. Until it could be determined that the individuals were not the suspect nor armed with a weapon, the 3 were ordered back to officers and detained. The homeowner gave consent to search the home, and it was then deemed that none of the 3 individuals that exited the home were the suspect officers were searching for, nor was the suspect in the home. The females were subsequently released. An additional nearby home was then checked, and the suspect was located and arrested. The woman was charged with assault with intent to murder, a warrant, and resisting and obstructing arrest. The victim was treated at an area hospital for her injuries and has been released. Following a complaint filed on behalf of the 11-year-old female, the Grand Rapids Police Department opened an internal investigation which is still ongoing. I'd now like to turn it over to Chief Rahinsky.
I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. I'm going to keep my prepared statements very brief because I think your questions really go to the crux of the matter. I'm going to share with you about 40 seconds of body-worn camera footage that captures some disturbing images. As Sergeant Williams stated, we had responded to an attempted homicide call, and in doing so came in contact with a few family members, the youngest being an 11-year-old juvenile. What you'll see on the body-worn camera is the juvenile is treated the same way that we would have treated any adult. And when you're dealing with an 11-year-old, it's inappropriate. So as an agency, we've got to have some tough conversations. We've got to have some tough conversations that include the community. It goes to the heart of what we're trying to accomplish right now with 21st century policing, taking a look at our policies. We need to look at everything from our hiring to our training to our supervision. What we're going to look at is when is it appropriate for discretion to override practice and protocol in dealing with an 11-year-old, and I hope to meet with the family later this afternoon. You need to take into account the situation, the young age, and respond accordingly. That being said, if we could dim the lights, I'll share the video.
Put it at the top. Hold on. Turn around. Stop going. All right, you're gonna walk backwards with me, okay? Okay, right there.
Back here, put your right hand behind your back. No, you're fine, you're all right. You're not going to jail or anything.
We recognize situations as being unique and make sure that we respond accordingly. The screams of the 11-year-old, they go to your heart. You hear the mother yelling from the steps that that's my child. And, that's our community's child. That's someone who lives in Grand Rapids. That's somebody who should feel safe running to an officer, not see an officer and have a response that's anything other than reassuring. So we've got work to do. We've got work to do as a profession, we've got work to do as an agency, and we've got hard discussions to have as a community. This time I'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Chief, first of all, thank you for holding the press conference. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you for sharing that video and trying to be transparent with the community. Yeah, that was tough to watch. I mean, as you know, I spoke with the girl yesterday, and seeing this took it to a whole nother level. When you first saw that and heard those screams, what was your reaction?
Instinctive, literally physical. I mean, listening to the 11-year-old's response makes my stomach turn. It makes me physically nauseous. To say anything less than that would be insincere. So I hope to share that with her this afternoon. Let me say that I don't think that makes me unique. I don't think there's a member of this department who's not going to watch that and question, what can we
You
do
say
differently?
That, but there were officers there that continued to conduct the way they did while she's screaming.
Yeah, we're trying to, and I can recognize this, there's a difference, a significant difference between being in the heat of the moment when you're dealing with the unknown. So the officers who were there, they're there looking for an attempt homicide suspect who stabbed someone. It's not unusual for suspects to ask someone in a home to hold the weapon for them, including juveniles, with the thinking being that a juvenile is less likely to be searched. So I recognize why the response is what it is. I recognize why the training is what it is. But I also see and feel that there's a disconnect between us recognizing unique situations and individuals of ages that need to be treated differently. And I don't know what that age is. It's not a hard, fast number. It's recognizing when you think you're in potential danger and acting accordingly. And in this situation, I don't think we acted accordingly. I think that discretion did not rule the day. And that's a discredit to the, it's a discredit to the way the community is being served, and it just reinforces the work that we've already started to do, but that we need to continue to do.
Yeah, speaking about that work, you have tried to improve police-community relations, and people in the community may say that it's incidents like this that need to be worked on, not office hours. What's your response to that?
Well, they go hand in hand. So it's not an either-or proposition. The conversations that they have with me, with command staff, at community meetings, we take what we hear and we share them with the officers. We modify training. We modify hiring standards. We look to make sure that the people who are being promoted are people who truly recognize the uniqueness of the role that we serve and the uniqueness of the community we serve. So it's a multifaceted challenge. And we don't claim to have the answers as of yet. If we did, we wouldn't be where we are now. But having said that, I do feel that we have the people in place to address this issue, these issues. We're having these tough conversations. We're being very introspective, and we're asking the community to help us get better.
Chief, we keep hearing from you, I think, responsiveness to community demands. The last time we had an issue like this, it was with a number of 14-year-olds. Your response and the response from the unions was completely different. Is there a different approach to how the unions are reacting to this and how maybe our elected officials should be responding to unions as to you?
Sure. That's a very fair question, Mario, and we're having that discussion now. So that conversation started early this morning and continues to be held and will continue to be held until we come to a conclusion. That being said, the issue that occurred some 9 months ago that initiated the Kroc Center was significantly different than this. In that instance, we were responding to clearly articulated facts from a resident regarding individuals of that age group carrying a firearm. So while I recognized at that time and still do the community's reaction to how that situation was handled, I would differentiate between what happened 9 months ago and what happened this past Wednesday. And I think our response as an agency needs to be significantly different.
So can we expect a similar response as yours from the unions?
I don't want to speak for the union, but I can say we've had preliminary discussions, and that conversation will continue throughout the day. And at the end of the day, I have no doubt that they have the city's best interest at heart. And by cities, I mean the officers, the residents, the people we serve. So that's the conversation that we're currently involved with.
How will this incident be addressed?
Well, I think we need to take a look at everything we do, because if an officer can point to policy or can point to training or point to hiring and say, this is what I was told, this is how I was taught, this is consistent with practice, then we've got a problem. And what I just said is accurate. We do have a problem. So we need to address it. We need to start taking a look at it through a lens that includes everything from training to de-escalation tactics to supervision. Having said that, I do think that we've started to have that difficult conversation. Asking an outside consultant to come in, 21st Century Policing, forming a community group to sit with us and look at any and all of our policies, that is a big step in law enforcement. It's rare that any profession, yet alone a public entity like law enforcement, opens up their doors, opens up their books, and asks outside assessors to come take a look at us, tell us what we're doing wrong, and tell us what we can do better. But we're in it for the long haul, and we've got to be.
Chief, you used the word unique when talking about the video. Have you ever been confronted with a similar situation like this with a young person getting in mindset?
Sure, and that's a fair question. Command staff and I have been having that conversation. So are there instances where you deal with young people who present a danger to either themselves or the officers? And there certainly is. I don't identify this as one of those. So in terms of uniqueness, what I would ask the officers to do, and we're going to have conversations, and we're going to use this in training. We'll use this video particularly. I want to have a conversation internally about what we just saw collectively, about, do you see a threat here? How could this threat have been addressed differently if you did perceive one? Could you not have asked the 11-year-old to just walk back to you, taken her behind the car, and had a very different conversation and different encounter with her that would have resulted in her safety and yours? So.
What, if any, precedent exists for dealing with minors in altercations? I know you said this is kind of unique, and there have been some cases where minors are, holding weapons for suspects. But is there any type of precedent for officers dealing with people, say under 16? And if not, what can be done to kind of establish a precedent?
And there's not, and therein lies the challenge. You can't say that anyone younger than 14 or anyone less than 5 foot and 100 pounds. So it really needs to be case specific. And what you can't teach is discretion. So we can train officers, but it's incumbent upon us to make sure we hire officers who can exercise discretion properly. It's important that we put them in scenarios where they're going to face similar situations and then have the skill set to de-escalate without them devolving into situations like this.
The Langford study revealed that there might be some bias in traffic stops. I'm assuming there's going to be some follow-up with that in terms of training. Is there something like this? Because the case with the 14-year-old, I know it's different, but it's still minors. The case with DB, I'm not going to say his full name, he was a minor, and these are all black children. So this, while it may be a unique, and it is a unique situation, like the person, it seems to be a repetitive theme of black minors being the subjects of poor discretion.
Well, I see this as a breakdown of the way we policed those situations. What I don't necessarily see it as is a critique of a larger racial issue. So 2 of those 3 issues we were dispatched to, and the third, which we just viewed, is one where we were attempting to locate an attempt homicide suspect. That said, I wouldn't deny the fact that there may be an underlying racial dynamic that as a department and as a community we continue to have a conversation on. And those are conversations that are difficult, not just in law enforcement, but for us as a community as a whole. But I think that's part of this conversation as well.
Is there a next step in that direction?
Well, we've implemented our anti-bias policy. We've brought in 2 different groups to teach. Lori Friedel out of the University of South Florida, bias-free policing. We contracted with Lambert and Associates to train the trainer, so we now train our new hires and have the ability to do retraining here within the department. So we've done a lot of the right things, but until we no longer have incidents like this, we're going to have to continue to find unique and innovative ways to address the challenges.
This is a question that a lot of people in the community are asking. Why did officers think that an 11-year-old girl screaming for her mom was a threat?
So, in terms of my previous answer, the only thing I can say in terms of what the officers may have perceived is that if the suspect was in fact in the home, the allegation was that she had stabbed and attempted homicide on a family member. If she had asked someone in the home to hold the weapon for her, knowing that she would be searched if she was in fact in the home, I imagine that the officers may have thought that potentially the weapon may have been secreted by the 11-year-old if she had been asked by someone older than herself to hold it. That being said, that's not a defense of what we just saw. And I think you can tell from my earlier statements, I'm not looking for explanations. I'm not looking for excuses. What I'm looking for is answers. And I think that's the same thing that the community is going to want. I think it's what the community is going to demand, and I think it's what we need to provide. So I appreciate you coming. We will be updating you as the situation continues to evolve. I hope to meet with family members later today. We're having ongoing dialogue with the officers involved. And I promise you that we will keep the community, because this is a community story. This is not just a story involving the Grand Rapids Police Department and these individuals. This affects, from my perspective, the way we're perceived in this community. It goes to the heart of what we're about. So this is a conversation that we'll make sure we're very transparent with and continue to be open with, and I appreciate you being here.
Why did you decide to speak today and decline an interview yesterday?
So you never want to have a statement until you're confident that you've got and gathered all the facts. So this was a quickly evolving situation. We initiated an internal affairs investigation last week. We still have work to be done. This, in terms of procedure, is actually earlier in the process than ideal. Ideally, we would like to get statements from everyone involved, make sure that the criminal prosecution of the incident that we were investigating was far underway and not going to be affected by any conversations that we had involving our response to that. So we try to balance those issues. Having said that, the story certainly prompted public concern. And I felt what we needed to do as an agency and a city was make sure that we were addressing those concerns. So it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act in terms of how quickly do you share information and how thorough can you be in ensuring that you've done all your due diligence, both in terms of internal stakeholders, making sure that they're aware of what's happening, and making sure that the family is aware as well. So we've had conversations with the grandmother, but have yet to have an opportunity to sit down and speak with honesty or her mother. So those are conversations we hope will take place later today. So again, thank you.